Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Earlier today, I asked if you guys wanted to hear some Sasquatch encounters. And majority rules. It was a yes. So before we get into these Sasquatch encounters, I have a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merchandise to help this channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. I also started a GoFundMe page a while back to help raise some money for urbex, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting equipment. If that's anything that you're interested in helping out with, that link is also in the description below. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with these Sasquatch encounters. Shall we? Today's first Sasquatch submission. Here are a few true stories from my long-past grandfather. I'll give you some backstory on who my grandfather was. We'll call him G. My grandfather was a very stoic and not easily spooked man. He was an old-school believer in common sense and rationality, but he also believed there's things in life that defy both. He told me once as a child, sometimes you're just not meant to have answers because you're not ready for them. Later in life, he held a spot on the Forest Land Natural Resources and Rural Development Board of British Columbia in 1991. He served his seat on the Forest Resource Commission as commissioner. He was also name-listed as Chief Forester on the 1955 insurance of British Columbia Tree Farm License, number 1, in the Skeena Valley. Originally issued in 1948, he's a credible source who had a lot to lose if these stories came out in his lifetime. His early years were spent on the West Coast working for McMillan Blowdell, a huge logging and forestry company that ushered in the modern forestry of today. He started working in the forests along the West Coast, starting back in the 40s as a youngster of 10 to the age of 16. Then he left home and went to work on the log booms, descending the Fraser River, then tugboats on the West Coast. Poster side note, the man went to his grave not knowing how to swim. People were a different type of ballsy back then. And returned at 18 and ran heavy equipment, building roads along the coast which opened up previously unseen areas of the coast for eventual logging. He worked for McMillan Blowdell as a foreman and bush boss in 1955. The British Columbia Tree Farm licensing system that is still used today, license number 1, 55 through 59, has his name on it. Throughout his years he spent on the West Coast, he traveled to very remote and infamous regions known for their danger. The Nass River Valley, known as the Headless Valley because of earlier explorers and trappers being found dead without their heads. Or the Chilcoot Valley, or the Pemberton Valley, the Skeena, the Bulkley, and the Squamish, and many, many more. He also had a few run-ins with what we call Sasquatch. The encounters with wildlife like grizzly, black bear, moose, as well as unfriendly natives were not uncommon. Each had obvious telltale signs and evidence that anyone who had spent years in the remote wilderness areas can recognize with no trouble. However, there were 3 occurrences that he kept secret to himself for most of his life, only talking about them on a couple of occasions. All occurred while he was working for McMillan Blowdell in remote areas. One being in a logging camp setting, the second surveying fire road building in the back country. The third occurred deep in the bush while he was running a large bulldozer building a forest road. All three encounters left him with a profound respect and sense of what to watch out for when discovering the signs of something being very wrong in your surroundings. His first encounter, he had witnessed for himself the tremendous size and strength of the creature for the first time in 1951. He watched this occasion from a distance of about 100 meters, as a large black-haired figure walked across the logging camp from one end to the other. The creature, he said, was the height of the top of a cookhouse, which is near 9 feet. And the stride was near 5 feet after later examination of the tracks. It walked across the camp in about a minute or so, and when it reached the cookhouse, it had to move barrels full of diesel away from the entrance to the cookhouse. When the weekends came, the logging crews would shut down and would even leave fully loaded fuel barrels stacked in front of the cookhouse doors to prevent the natives and hermits from breaking in and stealing food. The creature picked up the barrels, tossing them aside, one at a time without stopping or showing any signs of fatigue. Each barrel weighing several hundred pounds, being full of diesel. The creature just threw them aside, like we would throw aside an empty cardboard box. After clearing the barrels away from the cookhouse doors, it simply stripped the doors away in one movement, breaking the heavy hinges, leaving the doors to the one side of the doorway. It then had to bend over to get under the top of the doorway and enter the back of the storage area. It spent about 20 minutes inside before it must have sensed something, because it rushed out of the cookhouse and headed into the bush in a real hurry. He waited for a friend to show up before approaching the cookhouse. He found the storage area ransacked and the meat locker door ripped off its hinges. Tubs of lard, butter, sugar, and honey were consumed, along with things like chairs, fridges, and benches being pushed against the wall or toppled. The meat locker had been ransacked. Bundles of sausage and bacon had been mostly eaten, along with a large ham being nearly half eaten. Bags of flour and baking powder had been broken in half. It took a day to clean up the mess. Then they moved the camp 10 miles into another area. His second encounter happened in 1954. While G was again in a remote area logging, he had a small crew of guys. They headed out early one morning to drive survey stakes for laying out logging road to be constructed. They were walking down along a ridgeline in a natural pathway for game, 50 meters from the river that was just below them. They were walking up a gentle slope that led into the thicket of trees when G noticed down by the river, at a closer of a shoreline, what he thought was a bear. Thinking it was a huge bear, they froze in their tracks and ducked down to observe and maintain visual contact. He and the other members of the crew had heard strange, loud whoop sounds earlier, and thought it was a large and abnormally loud bird nearby. But this black-haired creature at the river's edge stood up on 2 massive legs, walked about 10 feet, and then let out a very loud whoop call, followed by an inhuman, but not of any known beast, deafening holler, somewhere between a growl and a scream. 3 of his guys that were behind G dropped their bundles of wooden stakes and hammers and ran back down the pathway towards the crew bus. The other guy that was ahead of him was paralyzed with fear, white as a ghost, clinging to a large cedar tree. The creature spooked at the sound of the 3 running and began in huge strides to quickly move into the brush just a couple of meters from the river's edge. My grandfather lost sight of the creature and feared the creature may try to double back and follow the 3 that had taken off back down the path. He recalled everything seemed to happen so quickly, as he ran up and grabbed the guy by the tree by his collar and then running to grab an axe that one of the guys had dropped, trying to hurry down the path towards the crew bus. On his way, they were pursued by something on both sides of them in the trees. Each time he stopped to listen for heavy sounds of something stomping through the brush. Whatever it was would stop until he started walking again, and then it would continue to shadow him in the bush. My grandfather also noticed a very strong odor, a musty, rotten smell, which was near sickening by the time they had reached the crew bus. He loaded his buddy in the front seat and, with no sign of the other guys, blew the horn a few times and yelled out their names and started driving back to camp. Two of the guys he found on the Bolt Run, headed for camp on the gravel road. My grandfather said the friend he had dragged and the two men they had picked up quit their job that day. They got back and left the West Coast. The last man in the crew, not yet mentioned in the story because G lost track of him when things first began to unfold, ended up assigned to return with another man with rifles to look for the last of the three runners. Apparently, Lost Track Guy had fallen back just prior to the event to relieve himself, and when he saw the three guys ahead of him in a panic and run, he too took off, not knowing what they were running from, but he saw the look and terror of their eyes. He followed the river to the bridge across the main gravel road about 3.5 kilometers further down and managed to get to where the road markers under construction were and got a ride back to camp. After a couple weeks of searching the area for runner number 3, and with no sign of him, they had to dissolve efforts and continue the project. They never recovered or found out what became of runner number 3. My grandfather's last encounter happened up near Pemberton area in 1962. He was operating a bulldozer building a logging road. Evening came and he shut down work and began to walk the machine back to the large fuel tank. It was on a trailer that the bulldozer pulled behind them to location, and then would unhitch and leave parked while he broke road for the rest of the day. As he was walking the machine back to the trailer, one of these things, this one at least 8 feet, it walked across the road in front of him, about 100 feet ahead of him. It took the creature 2 strides and a second to cross. It looked at him, eyes reflecting an orangey red in the lights of the bulldozer. It then went crashing through the trees. He watched as the trees, 20 to 30 feet tall and 7 to 12 inches in diameter, swayed like blades of grass. Larger trees shuddering as if an earthquake was moving them. As the creature moved further into the forest, G knew exactly what it was by then, and carried on with his task. He chose to leave the dozer hitched to the fuel trailer for the night, and he drove the machine back further down the newly roughed in the road to the crossroads in the open area, where the stars and moon could allow for better visibility. He spent the next 2 weeks building the road and never saw a thing again, but he knew that it was probably around watching him. A year later, in 1963, my father was born. In 1964, the family moved to Terrence, to Chilliwack, and G bought an orchard and got more involved with urban land development, though he never totally left forestry. He didn't leave the Forest Resource Commission until '95, when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer and passed away in 2000. Today's second Sasquatch submission. So this story is about the time I saw what I think was a Bigfoot or something similar. I live in Australia and we call it a Yowie here, so I'll refer to it as that throughout the story. For context, I was 13 and living on a farm. The sighting happened as the sun was going down, and to be honest to God, one of the scariest things I'd ever encountered. So to start off, I'd never seen anything on the property. It was a couple 100 acres, and the majority was bushland, with a few paddocks here and there for our cows to graze. I would frequently walk to a little segment of bush where I would start a little fire and make little shelters and whatnot. Basically, I'd just enjoy nature as I always loved it. It was around 4 p.m. maybe. It was springtime, so the days were getting longer. The first thing that put me on alert was a faint call, which I heard echo over the property. I'd describe it as kind of a high-pitched hyena laugh that went on for 5 solid seconds. This stopped me in my tracks. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I remember I had a little campsite. I decided to stay as it sounded far away, and I had a pocket knife on me in case I needed it to defend myself. Besides, in the bush, there's nothing that really can hurt you except for ruse. It was about 6 p.m. and I had packed up and walked back home for dinner. I hadn't heard anything weird or seen anything, but I hadn't forgot about the noise either. As I trudged through the bush, I remember hearing something else walking off to my right. It made big, heavy crunching sounds through the brush. I thought it was a roo because they sound like that, but I stopped and peeked through the trees and saw what I thought was a tree trunk at first, until it moved again. My stomach was absolutely dropping. I stood still, getting shaky. It walked around the little area of the bush in weird intervals, stopping and starting again. It didn't smell as bad as other stories say, but it definitely smelled wild, like an animal. It was making noises to itself, muttering and rambling like some kind of brain-damaged human, with the occasional high-pitched humph. It was like when you tell someone something new and they go, kinda high-pitched though. I was feeling queasy at this point. I couldn't see it. I could smell and hear it though. It then started walking around to in front of me before climbing up a small hill to my left. As it went in front of me about 30 meters through the bush, it seemed to look at me, although I couldn't really tell. It froze and showed what I can only describe as its teeth. It was really into animals at the age I was, so I knew what primates do. And this added to my panic. Was it going to attack me, eat me? As I was sweating and frozen in place, it quickly made its way into the brush and up a steep embankment onto my left, snapping branches and stuff on its way. As soon as I couldn't hear it, I bolted. I never ran so fast in my life. I remember stopping to catch my breath for 5 minutes while watching the tree line and hearing another call. Yet this time it was more high-pitched howl, with animalistic laughter at the end. I ran home, and I'll admit I cried and told my parents what I saw. They thought I saw a deer or kangaroo, but everything combined, and I thought I had saw a Yowie. I couldn't sleep for a few nights because every little noise made me think this thing was trying to break in. That's my story, and if you don't believe me, that's all right. I'm not asking you to. Holy jeezum. 2 amazing encounters. Well, 4, but 3 with one person and 1 with the other. They're truly amazing. First, I'd like to comment on this person's granddad. What a freaking man. This guy's a bear of a man. Working on the river and not knowing how to swim. We have to be thankful for what these men did for us years back. And it's sad that, we've forgotten what life was back then. What it was like to truly be a man. We just take it for granted. Walk around, go to the gym, work out. I'm a man. Go hunting, whatever. I mean, this guy could literally, more than likely, tear a person apart right now. One of our generation, or my generation. And they're scared of a Sasquatch. Just imagine what we would feel like. I mean, these guys were true men. I'm in awe, to be honest. Those are amazing stories right there. Just an amazing set of stories. And the poor guy had to live with the fact that one of his fellow workers, and probably a friend, had never shown back up. He was just gone, MIA. What, just incredible. The second encounter in Australia, the Yowie, wow, I wouldn't even want to go out in the bush, and I'm 42. This kid's going out in 13, just talking about roos and shit like that. I'm in the bush and I see a kangaroo. I'm going to run as fast as I can in the opposite direction. I've seen YouTube videos where they kick and beat the shit out of people, and just for fun. They're mean son of a bitches. I don't want to get hit by one of those. It'll rip your arm right out of socket and eat you or something. Anyway, I really enjoyed these encounters. I'm going to find some more Sasquatch encounters. They're really good, I never really was into Sasquatches. I live in Sasquatch country, up north where I live. In one of the encounters that I had just recently did, the Department of Conservation actually does have a wooden Sasquatch painted. And they move it around just to scare tourists. That's great, Some kid sees it, oh my god, daddy, and then it's a wooden Sasquatch. That's awesome. I don't know. These were just really amazing. I have a lot of respect for that person's grandfather. Men like that, this country wouldn't be where we are at now. We take a lot for granted. Even the people that say they don't, they do, because, this guy was out building roads and pounding survey stakes at 10 years old. 10 years old. My daughter's 11. And I could never imagine her or someone her age, one of her little buddy friends, going out in the woods, with a hammer and a set of stakes. It's just not something you can imagine, wow. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys ponder on these, because I'm probably going to ponder them for the rest of the night. And with that, guys, I bid you farewell.